My name is Noah Melgar. I was born in Miami, Florida. Grew up there until I was 7 years old. Went to kindergarten there, and then came to Kentucky. I've lived in Kentucky my whole life. Went to high school in Nelson County, and came to UK in 2004. Had joined the Marine Corps in 2005 after my freshman year of college, and have been back and forth in the reserves ever since. My father was a Marine, so um, always growing up, I had like Marine Corps posters and stuff like that sitting around my house, stickers. My dad's lunchbox when he went to work, he had a nice little Marine Corps sticker, the EGA, he was real proud of. But he never really pushed it and never really told me anything about his Marine Corps experience at all. And so I was always kind of interested. I always saw the way that people respected him, um, more so than everywhere he went, everybody knew who he was and things like that. He was just a simple airplane mechanic in the Marine Corps, worked on F-4 fighters, but was very proud of what he did. And so all through high school, I had a slight interest in the military always, but wasn't sure if that was my route. My parents, I was a really smart kid, so my parents always pushed me, go to college. It was all about academics. Did some things. I played soccer, but like I thought for a second about JROTC in high school, but then I was like, no, it's just a bunch of nerds. I'm not going to do anything like that with my life. So, but it always interested me, and then I got to college, and I realized I started talking more to my dad about his military experience and the things he's done, and the intangible things that kind of instilled in him is what I saw more than anything else. Was just the way he carried himself, his happy-go-lucky attitude. There's nothing that could ever go wrong. I've seen my dad mad maybe twice in my life, and so nothing seemed to phase him, and it always went back to his military days. Like, well, it can always be worse. When I got to college and I found out from a recruiter that I could do both college and the Marine Corps at the same time, I was pretty much hooked. I told my parents that's what I was going to do. It didn't go over very well. Mom cried, of course. Dad, I thought he would be a lot more supportive than he was, but he was actually kind of concerned. He was like, you need to get your degree. You need to get your degree. You don't need to go to the military. Get your degree, and then you can do whatever you want with your life. So, but I talked to him about it, and he didn't realize that you could go to college and be in the Marine Corps at the same time. And so he finally came around to it, and I enlisted May 9th, 2005. Went to boot camp, Parris Island. My biggest reason for joining was definitely the I, at that time it really had to be. It wasn't college money because I had college scholarships. It had to be because of my dad and the things that I saw in him that the Marine Corps instilled in him. And I knew that no matter what I did in my normal life, I could never get that sort of um, just his level-headedness, his experience. There's certain things the military teaches you, and it just makes a kind of a different sort of person. Before I left, I was big into soccer. I was a big skateboarder kid. Uh, I ran around with skateboard a lot, did a lot of film, um, drank, partied a lot. I'm not really sure who I would be right now. I was a very small kid in boot camp. I was about 125 pounds at that point, and I did well. I could run real well. I could do pull-ups really well. I listened real well. As my dad told me, he's like, the boot camp's simple. Just listen to what your drill instructor has to say, and just do everything at 100%. It's like, don't be lazy. Don't pretend like you have a chip on your shoulder. The easiest way to go through it is just to do what they have to say. And I feel like that's a lot of the way he goes through life. But so I did what I could. I was a squad leader for most of boot camp, but I didn't do as well in boot camp as I did the rest of my Marine Corps career. Boot camp is more just like kind of a blur for me. It was so quick, and That was, it's not too long ago, but that was 5 years ago. So.
Is there any one particular story, one particular event that stands out?
Yeah, I do remember. This was my freshman year of college. I just joined the boxing team, so I was doing boxing a lot. And so when I went to boot camp, I'd just been on the boxing team for like probably like 6 months. And so I was really small, but I was never ever scared of anyone my size. And a lot of things in boot camp is they match you up with people your size. And we did pugil sticks one time, and which is basically where you have like a jousting sort of event with, you've got a helmet on and a flak jacket, and we're on this bridge, and the battalion commander came up and wanted to watch, some people go at it, I guess. And my drill instructor picked me because he was like, he's always a good show. And so he was like, he took me in the corner. He was like, you know what, you better do this good. Don't disappoint your drill instructor. So I remember like just going as hard as I could, hitting this guy. I knocked his helmet like almost sideways. He fixed it. And he knocked my pugil stick out of my hand, and I tackled him off the bridge, and I was choking him, and finally they broke us up. And I was used to fighting and not having any sort of anger at people because of boxing. Like, so I mean, afterwards it's more of like, good game, give each other a hug, good job. And I remember then the battalion commander was like, man, that guy's got a lot of fight in him and stuff like that. And because of that, later on, when we got back from the Crucible on our, I think it's like a 5-mile, 10-mile hump back home or something like that, as you're leaving. And at that point, like pretty much boot camp's over. You got like a week and a half left of just administration. And they had the battalion commander guide on, and he was like, I need someone to carry my guide on. And of course, all the guides had their own guide-ons, and I was up there up front, and my drill instructor was like, hey, you remember him? And so he was like, get up here. So I got to go walk back with the lieutenant colonel holding his guide-on the whole way back in front of the entire, Fox company of 6 platoons of Marines. So that was pretty neat. The thing about our unit is it deploys a lot. We are tied with like one other unit for the most reservist deployments since Iraq has started. So it's pretty regimental about a group is activated for a year, they're there, they come back, 6 months later, the next group's going. And they're not entire company deployments, so it's usually just, 60, 80 guys, and if you've never gone before, your first one's mandatory. And after that, you can kind of pick and choose your deployments. But as crazy as the Marine Corps is, there's usually a giant wait list in line to get on any deployment. So, like, there's a group going to Afghanistan here in the next 2 weeks, and there's already like a 20-person waiting list trying to go to Afghanistan, and no one can get on it because they're already full with our unit. So my dad was kind of scared, but he was like, I've raised you up right. You know what to do. If it comes between you and someone else, I'd rather you come home. Between you and another, Iraqi insurgent, I really want you to come home. So, be sharp, be mindful, and do what you need to do. My mom was more of the, well, you're in school, you're in college. There's got to be a way you can get out of it. But I wasn't sure about that. I really did want to go, but also that wouldn't be looked very highly upon in the Marine Corps if someone, as we say, skated out of a deployment to just for school or something like that.
Did your mom's comments make you second guess?
Sometimes, yeah, she did. But I talked to my dad about it a couple of times, and he's like, well, it's your choice. But you know in your heart what you need to do. And I was like, there's already 4 other guys underneath me that are about to go. I'm sure they're going through the same things. I'm not just going to leave them not going. We had a small combat outpost. It was about the size of a football field and a half um, that we lived in. We had one large building in the center that used to be an old bed and breakfast that I guess the military took over and reinforced it, and then everything else was the Kwanzaa huts and like just looks like a bunch of temporary tool sheds. And so I lived in one of the tool sheds with about 6 other guys, and every single day, well, we were right on the border of Syria and Iraq and Jordan, where all those meet together. And we are the largest entry point into Iraq from Syria. It's basically the road goes from Baghdad to Damascus. So our biggest priority there, our mission there was to keep the border open, running, smooth, free of terrorist activities. So we processed like on slow days, probably like 2,000 something people a day through Iraq. On busy days, when a lot of the people are going to Mecca, about 8,000 to 10,000 people a day. Um, every person came in. We worked security at the port. We retina scanned every single person coming into the country from Iraq to check back with a database to see if anyone was, terrorist or any level tier 1, tier 2 level high value target. And that was our main mission there. Other missions were basically we had an area in about 2.5 hours in every direction that we could that we were kind of in charge of. Our border bumped up into Second LAR. They owned KV and everything else more westward, and so we had 2 or 3 small villages in there, West Walid and East Walid, and then the border village. So everything in there we were in charge of. Did patrols through there every single day. They were really friendly. West Walid and East Walid were. Just beyond East Walid was a refugee camp that had about 2,000 people in a tent village. So that was another thing. We went there almost every single day. And
why were they there?
they were there because they're Palestinian, and they used to live in Baghdad and do some of Saddam's dirty work. And some of them did death squad, some of them just did, I don't know, other random things. But of course, when we came in and Saddam was no longer in power, the Iraqi people hated these people. So they told them basically get out or we're going to kill you. So they all went as far west as they could, trying to exit into Syria. But they don't have passports or any sort of documentation because they were there under Saddam, and he never gave them anything like that. So they can't leave the country. So they're kind of stuck in this limbo area, and the United Nations comes in once a month to check on them and try to get some of them visas and try to get some of them out of there. But Palestine doesn't want them, so they can't go back to their own country. And they're sending a lot of them to Iceland, and a couple went to Norway. I don't know where they're all going, but they've been there for 6 years now.
What was your reaction to being in charge of all those different?
It was interesting, just because, well, the combat outpost was so small. I feel sorry for the people that we had, like 1 or 2 motor T people, 1 or 2 comm people in there that they never left that base. And if you can imagine living on something the size of a football field for a year, or 8 months, however long you're there, with walls that are like 20 feet high of HESCO barriers with barbed wire on top, machine gun posts around it. It's like being in a prison. So the fact that we got to go out every single day and do some sort of our schedule was regimented. We wake up, the first 6 hours that you're awake, you sit post. So you go to one of the machine gun posts on the base and you just guard the base for 6 hours. Then the next 6 hours are your port time. So you go out to the port and you work the port if it's open at that point in time. So if you're on a day shift, you come off, you go to the port, you're processing people in and out through the port of entry, doing security there, just fishing around, seeing what's going on, just kind of showing your presence or whatever. Then after that, you went to 6 hours of patrol. So that could be anything from a foot patrol through West Waleed, East Waleed. It could be a convoy all the way to KV or to Rutba, which would be like 3 hours that way and then 3 hours back. It could be a convoy just out in the middle of the desert. If you're on night patrols, we did a lot of listening posts, observation posts right on the border of Syria. So we'd send out like 4-man teams out there and just set them up along the border, burn with night vision goggles, just looking to see if people were coming across the border. The problem was, even though we had 5 squads, they trusted some squads more than others. As you know, being in the Marine Corps, one had a staff sergeant, certain staff sergeant, that they wouldn't let go outside the wire. So anytime something crazy happened, they wouldn't send him. So we always got stuck with a lot of the QRF missions. And a couple different ones. One of them was, we were at night, I was in the gym, and they came running into the gym, and they were like, get your stuff together, get your team together, be QRF, be on the trucks, we need you there in 2 minutes. Like, all right, so I'm running out there, and I had a long sleeve Nomex shirt on. I didn't even put my blouse on. I just threw my flak on, grabbed my rifle. I was in boots and utes. Got to the trucks, and they told us there was a guy that they spotted on a camera who's out in our trash pile, an Iraqi, who's on his cell phone and taking pictures of our base. So we go out of the gates. We got 3 trucks with us, 3 guys in each truck. So the trucks are didn't have a lot of people in them. They watched them on the G-Boss, which is a big camera that sits over top of our base and can see, thermal images. You can see out to like 10 clicks, or we could see into Syria with this camera. It was so high tech. And so they watched him run through East Waleed. And so we drove through East Waleed as fast as we could, and he was running into the refugee camp. And so we got to the refugee camp, and they'd lost him. They were using a infrared laser to kind of mark where they thought he was, and we had our MPGs, so we were trying to follow where he went into. Luckily, because we're reservists, we kind of have a different sort of fire team level. I was a junior in college here. 2 of my lance corporals, one was a senior at Transy. He's now in law school. And the other one was a freshman in Vandy Law. The third guy was, he was a freshman at Liberty College in North Carolina. So very educated people. The Vandy guy taught himself how to speak Arabic because that was his undergrad major, one of his majors. And so he could speak fluent Arabic, which is a big plus there when you're trying to do a mission like that. So I started snatching everybody up that I came to, because the people were coming out of their tents trying to see what's going on, because of course the Marines are all storming in. They've got all their dogs that alerted every time we come in there. And we got all our lights on, our Humvees. I start snatching everyone up, like go talk to Corral, Lance Corporal Corral's his name. Tell him there's a guy in here, he came through here. People were, I don't know where he went to. No one ever saw him. Snatching a couple people up. Got to like the 5th person, and they're like, we saw him, he went that way. So we used that person to guide us through the refugee camp, which is rather large, being 2,000 occupants. They had a couple of trailers there that they used for, I think, medical reasons, a couple other reasons. Some of the mayors of the camp lived there. And so we got there, and someone came out and greeted us, and they were like, no, it's locked, he's not in there. We're like, well, you better unlock it, otherwise we're going through this door. It's a small trailer. And sure enough, they unlocked it. He was in a back room in a corner. We put him in flexi cuffs and walked him back out to our trucks, drove him back to our base, and had an intel guy there that came out and questioned him. And they next day, a convoy came and picked him up, and that was it. The first time I heard fully automatic AK fire, um, this is another incident in the refugee camp. We The Iraqi police officers came to our base and they needed our help because they went into the refugee camp trying to arrest some people, and they started a riot and basically hurt a couple Iraqi police officers and kicked them out of the refugee camp. And initially we were like, well, this is not a military issue. This is a domestic issue between Iraqi police and that refugee camp. So it's got nothing to do with us. But because the refugee camp is actually under UN sanction, if it was just Iraqis on Iraqis, then that has nothing to do with us. But because it was UN, we actually had to go in there and figure out what was going on. So we rolled back into the refugee camp. You just hear this loud roar of people. Sounds like you're at UK football game, but they're not very happy. And so our trucks pull up, Iraqi police officers come up. They're already mad, and you got to watch out for them because they're not used to dealing with how Americans deal with things. You know, the escalation of force. You know, if someone doesn't shoot at you, you don't shoot at them. If your life's not in jeopardy, you can't just shoot somebody. You've got to detain them or put hands on them, or put them to the ground. Use some of your mock techniques, things like that you learn as a military police officer. So initially they send two of the guys out that they were supposed to be arrested, and they surrender. They're on their knees. The Iraqi police officers they hit them a couple times. They tie them up, put them in the back of the truck or whatever to take them to the jail. I never even got briefed on why we were arresting these people, but the hires got briefed, so we were told this is what we had to go do, so this is what we did. And me and Sergeant Wilson are standing outside the trucks because we're always down men, so we have very few dismounts. One guy always has to stay in the truck in the driver's seat. One guy always has to stay with the gun, so that's two guys in each truck that have to stay back. And we were dismounted, just providing security. Next thing I know, I hear a bunch of the Iraqi police officers went running into the tent village, and we were like, oh gosh, here it goes. Because there's just mobs and mobs of people in there. And we hear AK fire going off. And it's hard to tell, I didn't know if it was the refugees firing at the police officers. I didn't know if the police officers were firing, what was going on. And I just remember that was the first time I heard, AK fire like that. And me and Wilson looked at each other and we're like, well, here it goes. So me and him started running off in towards the refugee camp, towards this AK fire, trying to figure out what's going on. We had two other dismounts with us. Automatically called the QRF to get a little backup in there. We turned the corner and they're throwing rocks and stuff like that at the police officers. And one police officer the Iraqi police officer is firing from his hip with an AK into the crowd. How it didn't hit anybody, I have no idea. But I guess he was shooting right over their heads or something like that. But so Wilson grabbed him up real quick and was like, you can't do those sort of things. Took his gun away from him. The mob was going crazy. We tried to set up this little cordon. We got a couple other guys in there to make like a bubble. And they'd found a couple of the guys that they were there to arrest. But at this point, this mob was getting just completely out of control. Guys were breaking our lines, coming in, throwing punches and stuff like that. So there's Marines. I'm trying to hold my line. I'm turning around. There's Marines, fist fighting with guys that had broke through our perimeter and stuff like that, trying to pull. So we had a couple of prisoners, handcuffed, and they're trying to pull these prisoners out. And I remember Corporal Kitchens had two Iraqi guys over two guys he had the prisoner, and they'd jumped on his back, and he's an old grunt from back in the Gulf War that had reenlisted. He turned around and had two of these Iraqis over top of a car, pushing them down. So we were like, we got to get out of here. This is getting real bad real quick. There's another one of the Marines was, but the problem is they didn't have any weapons, and the guys that started throwing the rocks had already disappeared. So it's more just like mob mentality now. So you can't just fire at someone who's unarmed. So instead, we're sitting here fist fighting, people. I see a guy jump on another Marine's back, and I had this screwdriver beside my pistol that I'd used we had this ghetto microwave or whatever, so I used it to turn the microwave on. And I remember thinking, I'm about to stab this guy because he's choking one of my Marines with a screwdriver because I can't shoot him, or I'm scared to shoot him. Like, I feel like I'm justified in shooting someone who's choking a Marine on his back, but I don't know. There's a lot of repercussions that could come from that. You know how, JAG lawyers are. So I'm like, well, if it's hand-to-hand combat, I can always elevate one more above them. So I'm like, I can't find my knife. I'm going to stab this guy with a screwdriver. And I remember thinking that, but he flung him off. We got the guys snatched up. A woman came into our line. One of the worst parts was the women, too. Most of the men are more fearful of you because you can put your rifle in their chest. You can push them back with your rifle and hit them with the muzzle of your rifle and be like, look, it's real deal right now. Don't be coming in here. Quit throwing rocks. We got to arrest these guys. And but the women feel like they're untouchable. Like, you can't touch them. So they're just running through. A woman faints. Then the mob gets real crazy because they think we hurt her or something like that. So we finally get a couple of these guys, snatch them up, and we just drag them out, and we're heading towards the exit of this refugee camp as fast as we can. And all this probably took place within 15, 20 minutes, even though it felt like, an hour that I was in there. And we got most of them arrested that needed to be arrested for whatever reasons, gave them to the Iraqi police, turned them over to them, and we drove away, took them to jail, and went back to our base. And that was the refugee riot. I'd been into the refugee camp so many times already, and we had such a good rapport with them. Like, I'd been in the classrooms, all the children love us. I'd given, there's every time we roll up to the refugee camp, they know which squad is who, which trucks are. I mean, with 2,000 people, there's a lot of people there. So, each squad had their own small clique of people that liked them a lot. Same kid, Moham, would come out every single time, and have some drawing for me and trade me for candy, or he would always ask for my gloves so he could work more because he had blisters all over his hands. So I'd give him gloves. They'd always want our sunglasses and silly stuff like that. So, and we'd given them medical supplies. We'd had dinner with their, the mayors of the camp. So, and we're there with the UN, once a month. So it's not like, it was more of a mob mentality one-time event that took place because of, for whatever reasons. And at that point in time, people in the refugee camp called the UN immediately after that and told them that, we'd killed 2 or 3 people, and we were beating them and sort of things like that. And so immediately the UN came, scheduled another immediate visit, I think 3 weeks away, something like that, to come in and investigate it all on to what went down. But we all knew what we did and why we did it, and we didn't hurt a single person. People might have gotten a couple scrapes, a couple bruises, but so did we. We got our fair share of that too. The amount of discipline that it took for the Marines not to fire, not to injure anyone, I thought was really good. So I feel like we came out on top on that. But then another crazy incident happened a week later in the refugee camp, and then they loved us again. So and so by the time the UN came, they were like, "Oh, those were all lies. They didn't hurt anybody." We just changed shifts, so we were on a day shift now. Just came out of the gym again at like noon, and there's a giant fire that we saw in the distance, and so they called QRF, and they're like, y'all need to go check out. There's just huge smoke plume coming out, and we're like, these happen all the time in Iraq. They're just burning trash. Everywhere in Iraq, they just burn trash sometimes. So you see these giant smoke plumes. We're like, it's no big deal. So we get all manned up. The whole team's out there, and the smoke plume kind of goes away, or starting to fade out. So we're like, look, it's nothing. And my squad leader was like, all right, well, the poet team still wants to go out there. It was like a couple officers, I think it was a master guns and like 2 staff sergeants that made up that team. And he's like, give me a couple volunteers. So I raised my hand. It was me, Crow. Crow always came along to everything. And 1 or 2 other people. And instead of taking trucks, we just walked over there. So we're walking out over there, and I remember thinking, wow, something unusual is going on right now, because we're walking out there, and this place is a ghost town. West Walid was, and it's noon. There should be children out playing. There should be something going on, and no one's around. So I get this really uneasy feeling. You always think like, here it comes. This is gonna be it. And finally found one guy and asked him what's going on. And he said, there's a fire right over there in the refugee camp. This was probably, I don't have my dates right exactly. I've got it all written down. After each event happened that I thought was significant, I wrote it down in a journal. And so I got that at my house when things were still fresh on my mind. And so this couldn't be but like 2 weeks after the riot. So we're like, uh-oh, we got to go back in the refugee camp. So we're on our way there. We get there, and it's kind of mass chaos. There's people just running around. We found out that there was a tent fire that went on, and it went up and caught like 3.5 tents on fire. 13 people were critically injured. So we get in. Sergeant Wilson's starting to yell orders. All right, these guys follow me down here. These guys go over here. Make sure, they've got their American Red Crescent station. All the corpsmen were going in there that we had to get ready for all the people that were coming up. So we go running down, start dragging. Most people just had smoke inhalation, so you saw like the black around their face, but they were completely unconscious or whatever. So we're dragging a lot of them out, putting them in cars, the Iraqi people's cars, so they could drive them up to where the Red Crescent place was, and then they had like a small hard building where the school was too. And so we're driving people up there. I got back up there, and the next group went down there. And I remember like standing there, and I was supposed to not let anyone in, because of course every single person in the refugee camp now wants to get in, because they all know each other, and they want to see, what's wrong. Is this person alive? Are they okay? That's my brother, that's my uncle, that's my second cousin, sort of thing. And, we're like, no one can go in there because it's a small room. All our corpsmen are taxed out, trying to stabilize a couple of these people, doing CPR on them. I remember one distinctly, one car came screaming up, and a guy came out, and he's just holding what looks like a dead man, because he's been unconscious for a couple minutes, and he's crying, full of tears, and he's running past me, and I'm just like kind of overwhelmed with what's going on. And then it was right after that, a man came up, and I see him. He's crying too, hysterically, and there's 1 or 2 people like holding on to him, and they're crying too. And he's got like this, it looks like a blanket. And as he's coming in, it's this little girl, and she had she had third-degree burns over 80% of her body. That she was in one of the fires, and so I just saw her for probably an instant as they walked past me, and I kind of cleared the way and let them go in or whatever, and everyone there got stabilized. Everyone was fine that came in except for that little girl, and they thought about flight statting her out there. If there's any regular Iraqi people, they need to go to an Iraqi hospital. But again, because these people fell under United Nations sanctions, we could take care of them, and the United Nations will foot the bill. So the Master Guns and Sergeant Wilson got on top of this one of these trailers that were there and started calling in the helos for an air evacuation for her to take her over to one of the big hospitals, I think towards TQ or Al Assad, somewhere like that. And her family was there, and her family was just, as much as we tried to translate it to her and try to tell her, this is the only hope for this little girl, they didn't want to let the little girl go. So as the helicopters were already en route, we had to tell them, they're not going with you, so turn around. And then so we gave whatever medical supplies we had to them that were there for the Red Crescent people that were there. And that incident, that was a long day. That took probably like 4 or 5 hours. And finally, once everything was done, once we couldn't do any more good, the fire was out, most of the people were fine. What people were still like kind of hurt, the doctors were taken care of. We just packed up and went home. So
why did the incident with the girl keep you up?
Just because I was really concerned about, did she live? So, and I wanted to know, but I never asked because I didn't want to know. I'm pretty sure she didn't, and I feel like I heard rumors like that she didn't, but I never really asked because I didn't want to know. I don't know. It was just kind of one of those moments, nothing different than anyone else has seen back home. Any firefighter or any EMS paramedic or something like that. But just kind of it was one of those moments where everything kind of went in slow motion, sort of thing, and just kind of you're like, it was a real sobering moment. And
did you ever see her parents?
No, never did again. We went through the refugee camp plenty of times, and I always looked for her parents and looked for. I couldn't really tell what girl it was. I met hundreds of children there. I got albums and albums of Facebook of me playing with the refugee camp children, teaching them soccer. One of them had this tri-school sort of thing, and me and a couple of Marines found some bar to like hook up the wheel again and to fix their toys. So they're all like going up and down the hills. So we had a lot of. That was like one of the biggest. When you're working a lot like that in Iraq, a lot of stuff's real serious and it's real hard, and that kind of was our scapegoat whenever we got to go to the refugee camp, and there was just so many children there, and you could let your guard down a little bit because you felt safe when there were children around. No one's really gonna hurt you or blow you up when you have 15 kids around you, sort of thing, especially when they all know them. So you could always kind of let your guard down. You can pass your rifle off sometimes if you're going to play with the children. And so that was like the only good that I really, other than my boys back home or whatever, that was like the best good part about being in Iraq. That's what made me smile every single day whenever I got to go out and play with them. And then to see one of them that hurt, just, I don't know, it just kind of hit me a little bit. I'm proud of my tour and I'm proud of what I did, but I kind of like, as a Marine still, like there's a lot of guys in our unit that have combat action ribbons or whatever. And that's kind of the mark of, the real Marines versus, the not so real Marines, I guess, the ones that didn't see combat. And so you still kind of look down upon for that. And as much as I didn't want anything like that to happen, I'm so happy that nothing did happen. I never did get shot at. I never had to shoot at somebody. Uh, in my heart, these are great things, but still sometimes in your head, you're like, well, I don't add up to some of those other Marines because, I never did that. I'm very proud of the things that I've done. Uh, I don't know if I've done more for my country or if it's done more for me, kind of just with the experiences. I don't know how much I've benefited it, but it's definitely changed me. So I'm very, very happy for that. I'm a big social person. I love being beforehand. I love being in crowds. I go out, not necessarily to drink all the time, but I like having people around. I'm always People always call me to figure out what's going on. And coming back from Iraq or something like that, I didn't like big crowds of people anymore, and it kind of I didn't feel like I was the same person. Talking to girls was really hard because I hadn't talked to a single girl in. We had like one motor T girl kind of that was there, but other than that, in a year and 2 months, I hadn't talked to a single female. So that's another big. Uh, Here I am, just got back, just got into America. I went home and saw my family for like 3 days, and then I'm back here popping on campus. Um, all my friends are like trying to throw big parties for me and stuff like that, and I'm feeling real awkward there. And even though I felt comfortable and kind of relaxed, like everybody was like, I don't know, he's changed, it's different, and it just took me a while to transition back into normal college life.
When did you start feeling normal?
Um, Honestly, it was probably like 6 months later when uh, when people started inviting me back to parties and I was hanging out with more than just my Marine Corps buddies. It's so easy to come back because I'm a reservist unit. A lot of my friends went over there with me. I lived with four or three of them. So we would just stick around with ourselves and hang out with ourselves. So once I finally got on my shell, and when people were kind of surprised, like, you went to Iraq sort of thing, or you're a Marine, and it kind of caught them off guard. I was like, all right, well then I'm not carrying that around on my shoulder anymore. Whereas when I first came back, people were instantly like, well, what's wrong with him? Why is he acting so weird? So why is he? I remember this one story. I went to this party and met a couple girls right after that, and they didn't tell me this till about 6, 7 months later. They were like, when we first met you, you were there for a couple hours and you left, and um, whenever we talk about you at the party, because some of them were my old friends, and these girls were new girls that I'd never met before, and so she would always talk about how proud she was of her Marine friends and stuff like that, and they would always be like, you mean that that weird kid, the mean kid at the party? And she's like, he's not a mean guy, but like I guess that's just how I came across because I was so serious and stern. Like, you don't smile much, I guess. Over the last year, your face kind of gets stuck like that. But I was the same person, but it was also a completely different person. I realized, this is what I need to do. I need to graduate, need to get my degree. And I did the things that I didn't feel like doing, you don't have to go out every weekend. You can go to class. And I put all my effort into schoolwork. And in the beginning, when I went to school, I used to almost blame the teachers more. Like I was like, I know I'm really smart, and everyone else is going out, and the teachers failing 40% of the class. If I got a C, that's not that bad. They're just being too hard. And then I'd always get mad at, like, I bet there's one or two kids that are been studying all week for this, and now I kind of just smile and grin because I'm that kid. I don't care anymore. If it takes me a week to study for something, to get an A on an exam, that's what I do. I didn't come forward to any of my teachers and tell them that I'd just been to Iraq or anything. Um, the biggest, I guess, best group of people that I had were the Marines that were there with me. The fact that, you know, we're a local reserve unit here in Lexington, so there's a lot of college students that went over there with me and came back. So we had each other, so we didn't have a lot of that disconnect that some of the, active duty guys get when they leave, whatever giant base they were at for their 4 years, and then, they come back to a college campus where they don't know anybody. So I don't know how to really relate to them. I feel like that would be awful, and that's why we talk to as many military people as we can, and we usually do have a lot of Marines that hang out with us that have been active duty, for 4 years, just because we're that group of Marines on campus, that they can talk to and hang out with, and feel comfortable around, and that we've got some of the same bonds and experience that an 18-year-old, college kid just fresh out of high school who's worried about what frat or sorority they're joining can't relate to. Because of the Marine Corps and the deployments and the places that I've gone, my school is stretched out over 6 years now. So I've been around UK for a while. I've been in Lexington for a while. When I first got here, there was almost zero veteran support. It's not that I'm sure they supported us and they liked us, but there was just nothing there, no infrastructure to help a veteran. It was kind of like a weird case. You're kind of like, oh, you're that special kid. We'll try. We'll do what we can. And but now there's the Veteran Resource Center and a large veteran student group on campus that has made it very aware to the university. That there are 300, 400 some odd veterans here at campus, whether you realize it or not. They've grown their hair out. They've got beards now. They blend in with the local population, and they've got special needs, and they're not your average traditional student. So I've had great support now. Now when I just went to Uganda for like a month in the middle of a semester, and I could finally go to the Veteran Resource Center and be like, here are my orders. I've got to leave, and they're like, we'll take care of everything. We'll contact your teachers. We'll let them know what your case is. We'll work something out. You don't even have to. Don't stress about this. We understand. You've got to get your Marines ready for something like this. And beforehand, there was just nothing like that. It was just all on your own. If you had any sort of administration problem, you just had to usually we were just like, well, that's just what I get for being a Marine. Short-term and long-term goals. I don't know if it's because of I didn't have a very violent experience in Iraq, but I had a lot of experience with, I guess, refugees and people that are less fortunate than you. I've been pursuing a lot more of international work with different organizations. Last year over the summer I went to Thailand and did an internship there and did a lot of work with agriculture and tourism are their largest two industries. So did some work there with a university to help diversify agriculture and figure out how we can better off this community. And then this summer I'm trying to do the same thing with this group called Global Ag Risk. That they've got 15, 20 projects around the world. They're backed by the World Bank and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So that's kind of the direction I've been heading right now. I'd like to do different work around the world within my field of expertise.